Hello, the moving truck pulled away from 412 Maple Street, just as the autumn sun began its descent behind the row of identical suburban houses. Jessica Moore stood on the front lawn, exhausted, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, surveying the boxes stacked in her new living room through the window. 27 years old and starting over. Again. The breakup with Derek had been ugly. 3 years together. An engagement ring she'd thrown at his chest when she found the messages on his phone. She'd needed to get out of their shared apartment, away from the city, somewhere quiet where she could breathe and think and remember who she was before him. Maple Street seemed perfect. Affordable rent, tree-lined sidewalks, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave to each other. Safe. Boring even. Exactly what she needed. Welcome to the neighborhood. Jessica turned to find an older man approaching from the house next door, number 410. He had thinning gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a friendly smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He wore khaki pants and a cardigan despite the mild weather. "I'm Harold Brennan," he said, extending his hand. "I live just there. Saw the truck earlier and thought I'd come introduce myself. Jessica Moore." His handshake was firm but not aggressive. "Normal. Wonderful to meet you, Jessica. You know, I've lived here for 32 years. Watched this whole street grow up. If you need anything, recommendations for restaurants, a good plumber, whatever, I'm your man." His voice was warm, grandfatherly. "That's really kind. Thank you. The house has been empty for about 6 months now. The previous tenant, young woman like yourself, she left rather suddenly. But I'm sure you'll love it here. It's a good quiet street." Something about the way he said left suddenly made Jessica's skin prickle, but she pushed the feeling away. She was being paranoid, seeing threats everywhere after Derek. Over the next week, Harold proved to be everything he'd promised. Helpful, friendly, unobtrusive. He brought over a plate of homemade oatmeal cookies on her third day, still warm. On Saturday, he left a basket of tomatoes and squash from his garden on her porch with a handwritten note. When her kitchen sink started leaking, he recommended a plumber who came same day and charged half what she'd expected. "You're a lifesaver," Jessica told him when she saw him collecting his mail one evening. "Oh, it's nothing. We neighbors should look out for each other." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "Actually, Jessica, I've been meaning to ask. Would you like me to keep a spare key to your place? Just for emergencies, you know, in case you lock yourself out or if something happens and someone needs to get in quickly." Jessica hesitated. It seemed like a reasonable request. "Practical even. That's really thoughtful, Harold, I insist. I have spare keys for half the street. Makes everyone feel safer." He smiled that warm smile again. Against her better judgment, Jessica found herself nodding. "Okay, sure, let me make you a copy." What she didn't notice was the way Harold's eyes lingered on her window as she went inside. Or how he already knew she left for work every morning at exactly 7:43 a.m. Or that he'd been standing on his porch at midnight the previous evening, motionless, staring up at her darkened bedroom window for nearly 20 minutes. The next night, Jessica heard the first sound from her attic. A slow, deliberate creaking like someone taking careful steps across old floorboards. Jessica sat upright in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. There it was again, that slow, methodical creaking directly above her head. Not the random settling of an old house. This sounded deliberate, rhythmic. Footsteps. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. 2:47 a.m. The attic access door was at the end of the hallway, and she was certain, absolutely certain, she'd checked the latch before bed. She did it every night now. Had done it for the past 3 nights since the sound started. The creaking stopped. Silence pressed against her eardrums. Somehow worse than the noise. Jessica sat frozen, barely breathing, listening. After 15 minutes of nothing, she finally lay back down, pulling the covers to her chin like a child afraid of monsters. She must have dozed off eventually because pale morning light was streaming through her curtains when something made her eyes snap open. A smell, damp earth and something else, something organic and wrong. Jessica looked down at her bedroom floor and felt ice flood her veins, muddy footprints, large ones, boot-sized. They came from the direction of her hallway, stopped beside her bed, right where someone would stand to look down at her sleeping, then trailed back toward the door. At the end of the hall, the attic access door hung open several inches, darkness yawning beyond it. Her hands shook as she called 911. Two police officers arrived within 20 minutes. Officer Patterson, a stocky man with a sympathetic expression, and his younger partner, Officer Kim, walked through Jessica's house methodically, flashlights piercing the attic shadows. "There's no one up here, ma'am," Patterson called down. "No signs of forced entry anywhere. Could be an animal got in through a vent, tracked in some mud." "Animals don't leave boot prints," Jessica said, her voice tight. Officer Kim examined the floor. "These could be from maintenance workers? Has anyone been here recently? Plumbers, electricians?" "No, no one." "Old houses can play tricks on you," Patterson said gently. "Pipes make noise, foundations settle. The mud might have been there before and you just noticed it now in the right light." Jessica wanted to scream. She knew what she'd seen. She knew what she'd heard. After the police left, she stood at her kitchen window staring blankly at the backyard. Movement caught her eye. Harold was in his yard pruning roses, but his attention wasn't on the flowers. He was watching her house, watching her window with an expression she couldn't quite read. When their eyes met, he smiled and waved his pruning shears. Jessica didn't wave back. That afternoon, she drove to an electronics store and spent $400 she couldn't afford on a security camera system. 4 cameras: front door, back door, living room, and one aimed down the hallway toward her bedroom door. She installed them herself, syncing everything to her phone. Harold appeared on her porch while she was mounting the front camera. "Security cameras?" he asked, that friendly voice laced with something else. "Curiosity? Concern? Everything all right, Jessica? Just being cautious? Has something happened?" He stepped closer, peering at the camera. "You know, I'm right next door if you ever feel unsafe. I'm a light sleeper. I'd hear if anything was wrong." The way he said it made her stomach turn. How would he hear anything from inside his house? "I'm fine, Harold. Thank you. You look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" His eyes studied her face with unnerving intensity. "I'm fine," she repeated, her voice harder. He lingered for another moment, then smiled that grandfatherly smile. "Well, if you need anything at all, I'm right here." As he walked away, Jessica noticed something that made her blood run cold. Mud on his boots. The same reddish-brown mud from her bedroom floor. That night she lay awake until dawn, phone clutched in her hand, watching the camera feeds. Nothing unusual appeared on any of them, but she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, she was still being watched. The notification on Jessica's phone pulled her from shallow sleep at 3:09 a.m. Motion detected, living room camera. Her bedroom door was closed. She was alone, but someone was in her house. With trembling hands, Jessica opened the security app. What she saw on the playback made her stomach drop into freefall. The living room camera had activated 2 minutes earlier. The timestamp read 3:07 a.m. At first, the room appeared empty in the grainy night vision footage. Then, like something emerging from a nightmare, Harold Brennan rose into frame from behind her couch, from the direction of the basement door. Jessica watched in horror as he moved through her living room with practiced ease, his movements slow and careful. He knew exactly where to step to avoid the creaking floorboards. He'd done this before. Many times before. The hallway camera caught him next, approaching her bedroom with something in his hand. A flashlight turned off. He stopped outside her door, standing there for what felt like an eternity, but was only 45 seconds according to the timestamp. Then slowly he turned the handle and pushed the door open. Jessica's bedroom had no camera. She'd thought that would be invasive, ironic as that now seemed, but the hallway angle captured enough. Harold stood in her doorway motionless for 7 full minutes, just standing there, watching her sleep. When he finally backed away, closing the door with excruciating gentleness, the hallway camera caught his face in profile. He was smiling. Jessica was already dialing 911 with shaking fingers as she watched him descend back into her basement. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's in my house. I have him on camera. He came in through my basement. He's still here. The words tumbled out in a whispered rush. Ma'am, are you safe? Can you lock yourself in a room? I'm locked in my bedroom. Please hurry, please. Officers are 3 minutes away. Stay on the line with me. Jessica pulled up the basement camera feed she'd installed earlier that day, a last-minute addition. The angle showed her basement's corner where old storage boxes sat. but in the far edge of the frame she could see Harold crouching near the foundation wall. He was doing something with his hands, and then, impossibly, he disappeared into the wall itself. A crawl space. There was a crawl space connecting their basements. When the police arrived 4 minutes later, the longest 4 minutes of Jessica's life, they found Harold in his own house, sitting calmly in his living room in pajamas and a robe, reading a book. "Officers, what's this about?" he asked with that same warm, grandfatherly voice. "We need you to come with us, Mr. Brennan." "I don't understand." "Is Jessica all right? Has something happened?" Officer Patterson's expression was stone. "We have video footage of you entering Ms. Moore's residence through a basement crawlspace at 3:07 this morning." Harold's face didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "I was checking on her, making sure she was safe. She's been so anxious lately hearing noises. I have a key, she gave it to me. You entered through the basement, through a hidden crawlspace. The crawlspace has been there for years. The houses share a foundation. I was just making sure everything was secure down there." The previous tenant, Officer Kim interrupted, "filed a restraining order against you before she moved. We've been pulling records." Harold fell silent. At the station 2 hours later, with Jessica's video evidence playing on a monitor, Harold finally spoke, but not to the detectives. His eyes found Jessica through the observation window, and he smiled that terrible warm smile. "I was just making sure you were safe, Jessica. You looked so peaceful when you sleep." So peaceful. Jessica felt bile rise in her throat. The investigation revealed Harold had installed a lock on the crawlspace entrance decades ago, one only he had keys to. The previous tenant, Monica Reeves, had moved out suddenly after finding him in her bedroom at night. Before her, 2 other women had lived in 412 Maple Street, both leaving abruptly with no forwarding addresses. Harold was charged with breaking and entering, stalking, and criminal trespass. The judge denied bail. Jessica moved out 3 days later. She couldn't stay in that house, couldn't sleep knowing that behind her basement wall was a darkness that connected to something monstrous. She'd come to Maple Street looking for safety, for peace, for a fresh start. Instead, she'd learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they bring you cookies and smile from their porches and offer to keep you safe, all while holding the key to your nightmares. She never lived alone again. The end.